What we tend to do as adults is parent our children to conform, whereas they should be discovering the world. But my advice is think like a toddler. Think as you once did years ago.
But these are kind of the traits of the toddler. Be confident, be creative, dive right in, never give up, get noticed, be honest, show your feelings, have fun, and involve others.
You know, the work that I do is really around children's welfare, to create smarter, stronger, and kinder kids. That's what we want. We need innovation in our society, and this is where thinking like a toddler, being an outlier, being a risk taker is needed. Otherwise, we don't move on.
Have you ever been told to stop acting like a baby? Well, this week on the show we have Paul Lindley, and he's just written a book called Little Wins, where he explains that we need to embrace our inner toddler, as in our little children that are aged 1 to 3. They have so many good habits that as adults we should embrace to make our lives better, to make the workplace better. And Paul's actually the founder of Ella's Kitchen, which revolutionized baby food here in the UK. And his message is to really embrace these base feelings we have as a human and to act on them. And that's actually going to make us more successful people in the workplace and really just better as humans. And I love spending time with Paul. He's got a real heart for charities all around the world, in Africa because he was actually born there, and he named his companies after his kids because they were really pivotal in giving him new ideas. And I'm going to try to adopt a lot of these mindsets here at London Real and start to be thinking, what would my son Caden do in this situation? He's always present, in the moment, having fun, goofing around, loves human connection, and I want to start thinking of business and my life the same way, and hopefully you can too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the message of Paul Lindley. And inside the Academy, we're having lots of fun too. It's our rule number 5, and we got crazy things happening. We've got our Life Accelerator course coming soon, and of course, we've got Broadcast Yourself, where I teach you how to create your very own podcast and video talk show, just like I did with London Real. That is coming shortly as well. So go to londonreal.tv, log in, get all of our information where you can enjoy our full episodes for free. I will see you on the inside, and now I leave you with Paul Lindley. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is the award-winning entrepreneur Paul Lindley, the founder of Ella's Kitchen, the #1 UK toddler and baby brand with a turnover of $100 million per year. You advocate entrepreneurship that promotes both profit and a social purpose, particularly benefiting the rights of children around the world. You've just published your first book, Little Wins, The Huge Power of Thinking Like a Toddler, with a foreword by Sir Richard Branson. The book advocates that we return to the mindset of a child in order to unleash our fearlessness and creativity and become our most powerful selves. Paul, welcome to London Real.
Thank you very much, Brian. Well researched.
You know, it really hits home for me because I got a little baby boy that's running around my house. He's about to turn 11 months, and I've been watching him kind of grow up. He's my first natural child. I've got a stepdaughter as well. And so, you know, I do notice what he's like and the way he discovers movement and the way he makes mistakes. And it's kind of fascinating. And ever since I started reading your book, I'm looking at him differently, as in learning, what can I learn from him?
That's right. And you'll hopefully look at life differently as well as you look through his eyes at things that he's seeing, and you'll interpret them or try and understand how he's interpreting them. And that's kind of the heart of the book. The heart of the book really is around us all being able to unlock our personal potential, not by learning new skills, but by rediscovering old ones, those we had when we had the mindset of a toddler. So really looking through those eyes, which we all had. So it's not toddlers over there, it's toddlers us, that person we once were and still are. All those skills we learned over this amazing period with your son's right in the middle of now, between being a baby that can't move and can't communicate to a semi-independent person that's running around and discovering the world. All those skills we learned in that time, every one of us, we tend to throw out as childish and for our childhood. Yet some of them are vital to our personal lives, our business lives, and our society, I argue.
You know, there's this famous TED Talk with Sir Ken Robinson. You mentioned it in the book, and I've watched it a few times, where, you know, he's like, you know, schools are killing the creativity and spontaneity of our children. I mean, what is that balance between, I guess, learning and somewhat assimilating, yet still giving them the freedom so they don't grow up like us?
Well, what we tend to do as adults is parent our children to conform. We want them to focus on a very short term when they're at school on their exams and get the best exams. Whereas they should be discovering the world. They should be using all the breadth of the skill set that they've got to make themselves the best person and best prepared for adulthood as they could possibly be. So in adulthood, when we're looking to employ somebody as, say, an entrepreneur that's employing people, I'm looking for skill set, yes, and problem solving and those things that you can get qualifications for. But I'm also looking for communication skills, empathy, teamwork, all of those softer skills, which tend to be ignored, which I think toddlers excel at. And we all were a toddler, so it's within us all. So what Sir Ken Robinson talks about in that TED Talk, one fantastic example that I've got in there was how from 3 to 5 years old, 98% of us are creative because we think divergently. That's what we do day to day. We can move from concentrating one thing to another thing very, very easily, and that's a sign of creativity. By the time we're 25, only 2% of us are thinking divergently on a day-to-day basis. So 96% of us, nearly everybody, was once creative and now doesn't use that creativity. Now, some of that, sure, is around the way our brain develops, and the prefrontal cortex sort of brings inhibition and embarrassment and things like that. But a lot of it, in my view, is to do with parenting and the way society wants us to conform, whereas we need the outliers to invent new stuff, to innovate, to be the entrepreneurs, to think differently, and to find solutions to some of the problems that we've got in our world. Yet none of the society sort of, the ecosystem of society promotes that.
Right. And so your point of this book is to get us to raise our children differently, but also to get us as adults to kind of become children again.
Yeah, that race to grow up, which is needed, shouldn't be at the total expense of everything that we learned when we were under 5. And my point is, occasionally we should grow down, maybe 2 minutes a day or something. Grow down, remember that person you once were and those fantastic skills that you had then that you can rediscover, that maybe you're unconfident of having now, or you've got less tenacity, or you prefer to not involve others in your world. And all of those things can help us be a better person.
You know, I know you got some exercises in here, and I want to get through to those later. But I kind of want to give a little background here on where you got here or how you got here. And big question I want to ask you is, you know, you were in the television business, working for Nickelodeon. You had a career after your career at KPMG. And then you decided to go ahead and become an entrepreneur, which is one of the most painful things to do. So, and you founded Ella's Kitchen. I wondered if you could tell me, why make that choice? Because it's a hard one, it's a difficult road, and if I looked at your LinkedIn profile before that, I would say there was very little indication of you going that way. Could you tell me why you did that, and then a little bit about that whole adventure and what you realized by creating the company?
Sure. Well, the first point around why I did it, really, I never intended to be an entrepreneur. I don't think, I'm very skeptical of people who say, my life, I want to be an entrepreneur. Okay, what's your idea? I haven't got one, but I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I think it comes when you've got an idea and you decide to go down that route or not. So for me, it came. I'm always been the sort of person that prefers to be an outlier. I prefer to be the black sheep in the white sheep field. And I had an idea that I knew I would be more disappointed in myself, more regretful if I didn't follow it through and I saw somebody else do it and I continued in my nice little corporate career, than if I did it and failed and had to return to a job and find new work a couple of years later. I thought I would have learned so much in that period. So that was my sort of point where I had to jump or stay. And I chose to jump, and I chose to embrace that journey with a firm foot forward, believing in myself, and then chose to take the path less trodden as I walked my way towards the journey that I wanted to go on.
Okay, and the idea itself was when you found yourself feeding your daughter Ella. Is that really what sparked it?
Yeah, well, a couple of things were together, really. I had Ella, and we were going through weaning with her, as you have gone through the last few months. And as first-time parents, we were a little bit distraught that she stopped eating things that she'd eaten and she wasn't wanting to try new food at one point, and all children end up doing this. But so I was using silliness and mess and games to open her mouth when she giggled and pop a spoon in. And I worked out that if food is perceived as fun for young babies and children, then they'll like it. But the other part was really in that professional life at Nickelodeon, where I'd been in so many groups and focus groups and understanding of children through the last 9 years it was, where I understood how a 2 and a 4-year-old were different and how boys and girls developed differently and how they related to parents, how they related to brands, and how our society was driving unhealthiness with children and the obesity rates were increasing. So a third of our kids are overweight and 20% of them are obese. And I was thinking, someone needs to make food fun that happens to be healthy. Oh, I fancy doing that. And that's how I got. And unusually, I think, I had the concept of what the brand would stand for before I had a clue what products would be in that brand. And I knew what the values were from that brand. I knew what the mission would be. And that was, okay, I want to try this journey now. Let's go.
Do you think that's the way companies should be started, with the mission statement, the values, and then the product?
I absolutely 100% believe that, yeah. I think every entrepreneur that I know successful over my last 10-year journey, none of them have started off saying, the point of doing this is to make as much money as we can. The money follows the idea and the passion behind that idea and the creative way of achieving something that nobody's felt before. But the purpose of the company has got to be beyond that just making money, because that's what empowers people, encourages people to work for you, motivates people to work for you, and that trust that you've got from them, that they can see that their one little job is working to create this whole mission, and you take their one job out, whether it's the receptionist or the kind of marketing director, everybody's needed. Everyone's little cog turns, the lights go on, and this is the mission. And for Ella's Kitchen, our mission is to improve children's lives by developing healthier relationships with food. We happen to make exceptional products, pre-prepared, pre-made food products for them. But we also make cookbooks. We also use our influence for advocacy to get the government to change laws and to try and influence behaviour around children's food. All of that fits with our mission. And all of that stuff, walking the walk of that talk of what the mission is why our people want to work for us, enjoy working for us, stay a long time, get motivated, get energized, get productive, and therefore make more profits.
Start with why, as Simon Sinek would say.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah, and we think about the same thing about our mission around here. And if you really have a great mission, trying to get your people to come to work is not necessarily a chore. Whereas if you're trying to convince them to make that extra dollar, it's a different.
And
I
have this little theory that of the millennial generation and the post-millennial generation that will be coming through, those that are going to be the future leaders in our society from that generation want to work for somewhere that has values, that overlaps with their own values, that they can see that those values are lived and that they are making a difference, that their career is progressing, but also beyond their little career, they are part of a ripple, they are an individual ripple that's creating a wave that they feel overlaps with their values. Therefore, I think I think the big corporates and the big FTSE companies, etc., have got to sort of really be honest about what their mission is and how the short-term pressure to deliver financial returns over a quarter versus their long-term mission affects people wanting to work for them and believing that their long-term vision is something that is being seen through. So I've got this little theory that if we don't change things, more young people are going to want to be entrepreneurs and work for young companies that are growing and standing behind a mission. And that's great on the one hand, and I'm a huge advocate for small business, mission-led business entrepreneurs. But it does present a problem if my pension, your pension, all of our structure of our society is built on big companies, and the talent is not wanting to work for them. So there's a lot of ecosystem stuff that needs to be looked at, I think, with the way capitalism is being played out this century.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about the innovator's dilemma concept later as you talk more about Ella's, because the way you looked at it, the way you innovated with the packaging and the names and stuff, it wouldn't have been done at a huge company. No. And so we'll get to that later. You also mentioned something, we had a guest in here named Daniel Pink who says at work, people want three things, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Once you make a certain amount of money, those three things are important. And I think it's really important to remember that. And that purpose is really important.
Well, I'd add perhaps one more to those, and that's connectedness. They want to feel part of a tribe, part of a community, listened to. So all of those things are internal rewards. And what companies, corporate culture tends to do is emphasize the external rewards, the promotion, bonus, the office by the window or whatever, and status. Yet I really think, and toddlers are a fantastic example of this, and everyone once was a toddler, remember, they want the rewards that are personal, that are inside, that make them feel good, that make them feel like they're mastering something, or they've got the freedom to make mistakes and that autonomy, that they're connected to people, and that there's a purpose behind on the journey that they're going. So from Ella's Kitchen, for example, half of our bonuses are based on people living their values. We have net promoter scores every 6 months, and if managers don't live the values and treat people as people, one of our values is to be childlike, for example, then they won't get their bonus, and that's hugely motivational.
Interesting. And they get what, evaluated anonymously by people in the company? Okay. Yeah. And that rates them on values. And
not individually, as a team.
Right. Okay.
And an employee net promoter score, we've got a very high benchmark that we go for. We will be in the top 1% of companies in terms of would people recommend other people, their friends, to come and work for us. That is an indication that we state our mission, do we live it or not? And we live by that.
Yeah, super important. I want to talk about some of the aha moments you had early on with Ella's, but one thing I remember you talked about is that you understood from the get-go that it wasn't moms that bought the food, it was really the toddlers that made the decisions. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I would say most marketing executives for the major food brands in America would probably differ with your opinion at the time.
They would. And my view was, as a parent foremost, that however many times I bought, so if I went in the shop and bought something, I'm influenced by the marketing on the shelf, everything. If my baby or toddler spat it out 10 times, I'm not going to buy it the 11th time. So really, I think food is much more than just the taste. It's stimulating all of the senses. That's what our business tries to do. Try and stimulate the child's full senses. So it's a real sensory experience. And good relationship with food is not just about tasting the food. It's about the social aspect of food. It's about families eating together. It's about children being involved in knowing where food comes from and preparing food. And all of that it brings out the humanness of people. And that's what we did as a brand. We built the business around my family effectively in the early days. It's Ella's Kitchen. It's about a normal family going through the struggles and delights and strains of bringing a child up, and trying to relate that to another normal family who chooses to buy our product sometimes, and say it's a parent-to-parent relationship rather than a corporation to consumer. And that needs authenticity, and you need to be truthful about everything behind that. But that's the marketing route that we took that is different to saying mum, and it's generally mum that goes into the store still, but it's only 80% or so. So you know, dad does play a real role, and he plays a huge role at home as well, where it's close to 50-50 the people that are feeding their babies if it's a two-parent family, and above all of that, we thought, come from the child's point of view, come from the child's eyes point of view. If they are stimulated, if they recognize the color of the pack, the smell of it, the texture, the feel of it, then they're more likely to eat it.
It's almost hard to believe your story to a certain extent, but I love your optimism because you sit around at your family table, you make up some smoothies, you get your kids around the table, including Paddy, your son, and you do a focus group, you know? And like, this is a company that's later sold, you know, for a huge amount of money to, you know, an American conglomerate. But it actually happened that way, right?
It did. And we still use, you know, if we've got a new product coming out, we'll obviously use focus groups and groups of kids, babies, and they don't lie. It's part of my book that young toddlers are honest. They haven't learned to lie yet. All the toddlers kind of get that art quite quickly. Right. The younger ones, and when they're tasting our food, you know, there's no niceties about, oh, I don't really want to tell them that it tastes too sour, or, you know, there's an off note there or something. They'll just spit it out or throw it on the floor or throw it up the wall. But if they love it, they'll absolutely shake. And that's exactly what you want when you're developing a product. You want unfiltered honesty in it, and you know, it touches into Little Wins. One of the chapters is about that honesty of toddlers and babies that we can learn from in adult life. And so your son, you call the product, I think you're still your bestseller, the red one, because he was into the color and reminded of something in the house. And you also went for these packages that you could squeeze and you couldn't see through. Yeah. And it's funny, I came home the other night and I told my lady that you were coming on the show, and she pointed to the kitchen and there's a bunch of your packages. So like, obviously, you know, you're doing something right, but when you had to make that decision to go against the grain, was that a big chance to take? Yeah, the whole journey is a big chance to take, and evaluated risk as I was going along. But, you know, the confidence to listen to my own gut feeling as a parent about how we fed our child, and the little focus groups, let's call them, but like our friends and my wife's book club and the little NCT group that we were in and stuff, their feedback meant more to me than the professionals who were in the supply chain and were saying, you know, people have had glass jars forever, they're not going to change, they need to see the food. And I'm thinking, well, fundamentally it's orange. Our recipes are going to be different, but they're not engaging to the child, so let's try it. And then with the colours, we have very bright colours on our packaging. Now, again, the professionals were saying, well, your main message is about being organic, so you want greens and browns and pastel colours and things. And I'm thinking, actually, I want a child to recognise it and get excited about that. Let's have it bright, bold, primary colours. And that creativity is quite childlike, and you know, it fits into my whole theory. But it bucked the trend. People hadn't done it before. It was a risk. It did take off. And, you know, you can look back on that and say, okay, that was quite a powerful moment. The fact that we're really proud that we've disrupted and, you know, I wouldn't hesitate really to say revolutionized the baby food market. Other people use pouches now. Other people have learned that actually it's more convenient for the parents. It's more less processed. You don't have to process as much if you get the recipe right. And children like the texture. So we're proud that people have chosen to move with that times, and the market is predominantly pouches now, and that we started that. That's disruption.
Yeah, and then the toddlers themselves can grab it and feed themselves and really get to know their food better, as opposed to just daddy trying to stuff it in.
Yeah, and like anything in life, if we find some ownership, it's a real internal human thing that if you find ownership of something, then you're, you know, more passionate about it, then you're more likely to try it, you're more likely to like it. On all of those things, and that's played through with the formal research that we've done subsequently, but the gut feel I had as a parent.
speak on this thing about innovator's dilemma, and then I want to start learning a bit more about how I can be a toddler. But it's a concept that's been out there for a while, in that an established company doesn't want to cannibalize its own sales and its profit margins. And I saw this in the city when it came to kind of electronic broking. Everybody wanted to kind of hold on to their golden goose and milk it as long as possible. And it takes an innovator, a startup, to come in with nothing to lose, with lots of great ideas, maybe thinking like a toddler, to shake things up. And a lot of times that cycle repeats. Do you see that ever changing in the future? Do you agree with that concept? And will it always be those upstarts that kind of educate and potentially bankrupt those companies in our pension schemes?
Well, if you look back at the S&P 500 or the FTSE 100 or whatever, sort of 30 years ago, there would be a huge minority of the companies that were there then that are still there now, probably 10% or something like that. I don't know the exact figure. But and it's because exactly that point. These startups that came along have become established and been able to grow because the big companies weren't prepared to take the risk. Now, that's a fact, and it is a sustainable economic model, I think, is if you let the startups fail, learn, adapt, prototype, develop, and then when they've got something that works, go and offer to buy them, and that might suit the entrepreneur. The scale-up opportunities might be a good thing for both sides. There are other ways to do it, though. There's a huge sort of focus on intrapreneurship now, so having entrepreneurs on the inside and have that thinking developed. And I think there's more miles to go in that still. There's private equity that's type model where the big companies invest in startups and kind of offer their resources but don't control the destiny, leave it with the entrepreneur to make the operational decisions and some of the strategic decisions. They're right. The fact remains, we need innovation in our society, whether it's for practical purposes of improving our lives by wanting to buy something that's better, or it's more fundamental in the way we operate as a society and the solutions that have tried and tried and tried again, and we tend to keep trying the same old solutions. And this is where thinking like a toddler, being an outlier, being a risk taker is needed. Otherwise, we don't move on.
Right. Now, the ideas for this book came about through Ella's, right? Because now you're in touch with the children. You try to keep it playful at work. So I'm guessing a lot of this is developed over the years, maybe internally. And then at the end, you kind of realize, wait a second, there's a big message I want to get out there.
Yes, I think, I do a lot of talking to entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs. And the questions invariably come up at the end. Well, what's your advice? What was the secret to success, etc.? And I can talk about X, Y, or Z within that. But fundamentally, I worked out all X, Y, and Z, and A and B and C were all toddler traits. So my advice to them, if and one of my sort of things is don't necessarily take advice from people because it's them, they're in their world at the time that they experienced it, that they're passing on. But my advice is think like a toddler. Think as you once did years ago, and the things that are in that book. So that dawned on me, and then I started thinking, well, maybe I could write a book for entrepreneurs. And when I sat down and we started structuring it and thinking and talking to the publisher, they were like, hang on, everyone was once a toddler. Anyone that is experiencing something new or trying to improve something that they do or trying to conquer a challenge, this is relevant to. So if your kids are just leaving home and you're perhaps, say, in your 50s or 60s, and the center of who you perceived yourself as has changed, maybe you need the confidence or the creativity or the determination to do something new. If you've just had kids and you're a mum about to return to work, maybe there's things in there that you can look within yourself to give you the confidence to put that CV in or to try a job that you didn't do before. All of those things, right back to the entrepreneurs or the student leaving university thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Every one of us, I think there's messages in there to say you can be more free thinking, you can be more self-confident, you can be more imaginative by thinking as you once did many years ago.
And you have about 9 different steps in here. I'm just going to read them off. It's on page 22 if people want to check on their own books. But these are kind of the traits of the toddler. Be confident, be creative, dive right in, never give up, get noticed, be honest, show your feelings, have fun, and involve others. Now, those are big concepts. How can people kind of try to get to be like a toddler? Because you have lots of exercises in here and things like that.
Yeah.
But for someone that's watching or listening, what's one way they could try to experience that now?
Well, let's break it down a little bit. Those 9 things really showed themselves during this amazing period where we all went through between sort of 6 months and maybe 2 years, when we all learnt to smile and we learnt to walk and we learnt to talk and we learnt to play. And that's how I structured this book. So creativity and confidence is really about that first time you smiled and took the reaction of someone liked you smiling, you got confident to smile even more. Diving right in and never giving up, every one of us started to try and walk. And we fell over 500 times, and we cried, and we cut our lips, and we bruised our knees, and all of that sort of thing. But there was something within us that got up again. And none of us knew that it was the 500th time or the 1000th time or whatever that it would work. But one day it did work. And I'm saying that when you're trying something difficult and as an adult and you're tempted to give up, just remember that one person that you once were and try that one time again. So we can go through each individual one if you like. I'll just give you a quick story about a little girl that started school, first day at school, and the teacher asked them, all of the class, to draw somebody that they loved. So they're all down there, and this is the teacher's way of getting to know the kids. And she stops at this one little girl and she says, wow, who's that? What's that? And kind of holds it up and can't quite make out what it is. And the little girl said, oh, it's God. And the teacher said, but nobody knows what God looks like. And the little girl says, well, they do now. And her confidence in what she'd drawn was God. I mean, who are we to say that God doesn't look like that? But her creativity and her confidence to kind of just say, this is what I've done and this is what I'm proud of. Now, we'll all have similar stories of what we did when we went to the nativity play and we were asked to dance. We'd never danced in public before, or whatever it is. We all have within ourselves, or we might notice in our children or our friends' children or whatever, that sort of creativity and confidence. Now, I can give you examples from all those other different 7 attributes of being a toddler that we can easily find and see. And so my whole concept is grow up. Absolutely do grow up. There's all those skills and experience we need, but don't at the total expense of the skills that you learned when you were a child, throw them all out as being childish and for your childhood. Because if you grow down 1 or 2 minutes every single day, and recapture some of that, you'll look at the world in a completely different way. And at the end of every chapter, there's a link to a YouTube video, and one of them is this dad with his little girl. Maybe she's about 18 months, 2 years old, and she's seeing Summer Rain for the first time. And they're looking outside of their garage on the driveway, and they go out and have a little dance. And her face about rain is just amazing. But it's interesting looking at the dad's face, because he's as excited about it as she is. Now, I just question whether when he goes to work the next day, whether he acts like that when surprises or something new happens, or whether he puts his work face on and doesn't react like that. Now, I'm saying do. And just next time we're driving home and it's raining and we're kind of annoyed because we can't see it, just listen to the sound of the rain on the windscreen, or watch the clouds or something like. Just look at the world in a slightly different way. And you can, if we relate that back to maybe a workplace, question why we have a meeting on 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and just kind of put your hand up and say, I've got the confidence and the creativity to say, I don't think we should have it, because I think the one we have on a Wednesday evening, we should combine the two and have this sort of agenda. And actually maybe that those sort of things, it's just those little things that can change our life. So little wins can make big changes, but also little, wins, as in little people are the people we should get the inspiration from, not the big and the powerful.
And this concept of growing down for a few minutes a day, if I want to practice it, say tonight after you've left, is that where I just kind of get into the mindset of what a toddler might do, might think, review the things I've thought about that day, what I'm going to do that night, and just think, what would a toddler do? And that might actually be inherently more fun, more creative, more empowering. Is that idea?
It is. The first chapter, I invite people to grow down, and I invite them to find a seminal moment from their childhood when they were happy and they can remember all the sensorial things that were going on. So not really from a photograph where it's just a vision, but or if people have got children, from a moment in their childhood or grandchildren. But remember how the fire smelt, or the stars were, or the music was, or the laughter was, and get into a moment. The moment I choose, which gets me there every time, is this moment with my son Paddy. He was 4 and he'd just started school. And after a couple of weeks, he returned home and he was so happy. He came in and he said, Daddy, my friend Natalie brings a boiled egg to school and she opens it by cracking it on her head. And he thought this was just great. So I said, should we do it? Let's go in the kitchen. So I boiled an egg, I cooled it, I swapped it from an uncooked egg, and I turned around to him at the little island in the middle of our kitchen and I said, give it a go. And he cracked it, and for like 2-3 seconds there was total silence as the egg dribbled down his face. And then he laughed and he chuckled in his voice as he told me that, Daddy, you tricked me. But that moment is so seminal for me because both of us were falling around on the floor laughing at this joke. And I remember the steam off the oven, and I remember he was wearing a little football kit, and he had an Incredibles lunchbox, and the music I remember that was on the radio, and all of those things. And for that moment, I didn't think about the spreadsheet error that I had to solve in my business that I was just starting, or I didn't even think about what we were having for dinner or the phone calls that I had to make that evening. I was just in that moment, and I was a toddler myself. And I'm saying if we just can live in a moment for a second and remember something like that, you'll look at the world in a different way. And, you know, there's so many things about being like that. For example, decision making. So toddlers obviously live in the same physical world that we live in, yet their ability to make decisions is very binary. The world is black and white. I like you, I don't like you, therefore I'm going to come to you or I'm going to run away. I like this food, I don't. I want to watch this TV program, I don't. I'm going to pick up my clothes, I'm not. It's very binary. Yet we live in obviously we have got more complicated decisions to make sometimes, but not all the time. And what they do with gut feel and using the information they've got and not worrying about the information that they don't have is something that I think we can learn from. And I've been talking about they all the time. Well, that was once you and me. So we once made decisions much more quickly than we, and were comfortable with them and moved on. And it's little aspects like that it's those little wins that I think that we can move forward from. Not from learning from, okay, this guy's written a book and he says do this, do that, by reflecting who you once were and doing it yourself.
And so sometimes I ask myself, what would Chuck Norris do in this situation? What I should be asking myself is, what would my 10-month-old boy do?
Yeah.
I think I might agree with you. Now, we all hear that we need to be more present, and we read books like The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and these are some of the similar messages you're saying, because the toddlers are present by definition, right? They're not overthinking things. They're just being in the moment and who they are, right?
Exactly, and I think that we live in a world where it is complicated, but we overcomplicate that world, and we need to just declutter a bit and work out what different priorities are in our lives. And I think we'll conclude, you know, the priority of being happy trumps the priority of being rich. And we get that confused sometimes. You know, I do, and I'm, you know, I've written a book about how I shouldn't. But, you know, so it's just stepping back, pressing pause, rewind a little bit, work out what, you know, is it really that dad who I talked about watching his daughter see rain for the first time? That's a moment that he would never get again. So I bet he was glad doing that rather than doing the meeting that happens every Monday morning and doesn't really achieve anything. And it's you know, we've got to work out a way of blending our lives. I think the whole idea of the previous generations of you've got to work and a life balance and you've got to try and achieve that as though they're kind of butt up against each other. Well, we should be providing working environments that have values in them and people want to go to work, and it's not a balance, it's not a tough thing. I've got these values, but at 9 o'clock in the morning they change to these values. There's a whole blend. And, you know, as we can work more flexibly at home, abroad, kind of at the night time, the daytime, we can blend our lives better, and being able to do that, I think we'll free up some of these toddler things about being creative and being more playful and involving others more.
They say that the company culture is a leading indicator of the customer experience. You know, I think Tony Hsieh says that, the CEO of Zappos, and the more I think about it, it's true. I mean, if you really have people inside your company that are excited to be there every day, it will end up in the consumer's hands, and vice versa. If they're not, it will end up disappointing people.
And I think that turns something that's an established, you know, fact on its head, and that is that businesses should focus on their customers and everything should be focused on the customer. I've begun to conclude that actually that's not right. If you focus on your team, you stand by a mission and you believe in that and you act towards that, and you motivate your team towards that mission, automatically your customer will receive the product, the service that they want, that you promise to deliver under your mission, and that your team will stay longer, be more motivated. So it's really about primarily focusing on your team. They understand why the company exists, they understand what they have to do and how the two link.
You sold Ella's, for a nice chunk of change. It was a great exit, something you had to be proud of as an entrepreneur. What were just some of those company culture pieces now that you look back that made and continues to make that company a success? Because you're still firing away as if you were an independent company. I'm sure there's some aspects of the toddler here, but if I walked in to your place in Reading, what are some of the 3 things I might notice right away as in, oh, this seems different than Microsoft?
I would hope you would get the point that people enjoyed being there. So there's fun, and we can interpret fun in different ways. It depends what the people are. But there's a buzz, there's a vibe, there's something in the air that people are playing off each other, and they're friends as well as colleagues, and there's just a vibe there. The environment itself, the physical environment itself, is a converted barn or 2 barns that is not like an office. And it's not formal in any which way. So when we do product launches, there's dressing up days, or there's like toddler meals, and there's all sorts of things that is heart of our culture. If you're a pig farmer, you might have a very different culture, but encouraging that culture. I think Winston Churchill once said that when we build buildings, we shape them, but thereafter they shape us. And I think it's incredibly important, the environment and the culture of a company in ultimately the valuation of that company. So you asked me kind of the decision points of sort of how I got comfortable and why ultimately we sold to who we did. And I would say I thought about it a little bit like a horse race, in that it's all to do with the word value. So the first thing that we come across is values. So no matter what else comes down the line, I wanted my daughter's name's on our company. I wanted to be involved in some way, which way. I'm chairman now. I'm not the chief executive. And in being able to stand back, I wanted to know that the values that the people we were selling to were similar to ours, and that they would respect ours thereafter, and that we'd be able to continue with the mission that we originally had. And I'm delighted that we picked the people that do believe in that. And since acquisition, we've become a B corporation. So our values are enshrined now within our Articles of Association, and really, really proud of that. Second, so number of potential acquirers get over that hurdle. Then it's the valuation and the value. And is there an overlap between what we want and what we see the value and what they do? And we did reach that. And then the third thing was added value. And how is this partner, acquirer, going to add value to our company? And we had a growing business in the United States that was under pressure because there was more competition out there. There was more people prepared to follow us, but were venture capital backed, that were perhaps making losses, but perhaps were going for market share. And we wanted to compete better there. So what do? Do we risk our European business profitability to shore that up? Do we come out of the market? Do we find a partner locally that can help us with distribution and help us with efficiencies in the supply chain? And that's what we chose to do.
Okay, that's very interesting. It's good for entrepreneurs to hear your mindset on all those pieces. Talk to me about charities, because they always seem to be integral into the companies you've founded, including the one you're running today. And tell me, does every great company, by definition, need a charity to be involved in it? I had a guest in here a few years ago that said, Brian, donate money right away to charity. He said it will come back, and it comes back in the strangest ways, and almost a direct correlation. So even if you are Scrooge, the most selfish person out there, it's actually a good business decision to do that. And I have to say, it's been true when I've done that. I mean, we're involved with Founders for Schools and with Westminster Kingsway College. And every time I do something there, which just might seem I go there for a morning to help the kids, usually within a few weeks later, something pops back in that is just like, where did that come from? What's your take on it?
My take really is actually it's business that is the best institution, or company is the best institution that we have to create sustainable social change or environmental change. So, having a sustainable model where you're making profits and you're reinvesting some or all of those profits in something that is good for the community or good for the environment is vital, because we create an economy fueled by businesses and profitability to serve a society. in my view. I don't think the two things are equal. I don't think we have a society to prop up an economy, because then you monetize everything. And as kind of we talk about, toddlers don't care, about monetary value. They care about being hugged and having empathy and having fun and, learning stuff.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, and I'll see you on the inside.
Not to worry too much about what other people think. That your happiness will be around people, not status, and your relationship with people, not status or money. And I would say kindness, remain kind. Your relationship with people will compassion and dignity and things like that, which aren't really taught in school, thought of, when you think of capitalism, when you think of getting a job. They're the things that as you grow older, you sort of value